was just astronomical. You know, they did look at alternatives back when we made our decisions, and part of our decision was that there didn't seem to be a plan for total removal, but a lowering of levels that's within the acceptable range. But I think that's gonna mean air circulation of some kind. It may be a more efficient way to do it, but,
And they may have to include that in their,
that was part of their
in
proposal.
their-
If you examine their original proposals, I think.
well, or in their
Stated.
plan, or in their report back, they may say, hey, you may have other ways to do this, they're so expensive, what you're doing now is as good as it's gonna get, but this is how much it's gonna cost you in the long run. You know, if they say, hey, you're gonna spend another $50,000 a year just to circulate the air to keep the levels down, I think that should be in the plan. And if they say the only other way to do it is to do X, Y, and Z, that's gonna cost you an extra $1 million, then you will have to weigh, do we pay another $50,000 a year to circulate extra air, or do you wanna spend the
Put
$1
that
million?
50 towards a mortgage and something else. Carolina?
My recollection was the original proposals had millions of dollars of work that had to be done. And we have that estimate. So I'd like to go back to the original proposals and Pink's
there.
presentations, which said if we have to score the windows, if in fact there's an abundance of PCB laden caulk, then it may include up to cutting and scoring masonry out of the walls and taking all the windows out, and it'll cost X. I think we should start with that information. We have it.
Right.
Well, I think what we need to know is, do we in fact have to do that to make that a usable building? I
Right.
mean, if we don't need to score the.
Yes, we've been told that the
Well-
five-year plan, yes, encapsulation is not long-term. That's what we were told in our presentation.
And the other thing I would like is, obviously, the levels that are necessary to have fifth graders and the age group that is in that building are different than the levels that could be tolerated by,
But we're using the lower numbers.
I understand
highest
that, but an analysis of what the differentiation would be, because if,
Tell me more, because I need to explain it to the companies.
right now, the
inside.
level is what, 300?
300, that's what we've set,
But that's good for
Right.
everyone, including the fifth graders.
That's what I'm
Right.
saying.
down to first graders.
But adults,
Plus-
the levels for an adult would be different, is that not correct?
I think maybe 450.
Yeah, they're higher, so we're going with the lower
It's-
number.
it's
I
also
understand.
less time in the building, which would reflect that acceptable level. If someone's not gonna be in the building for 8 hours, they would be able to be exposed to higher levels, according to the scientists, which are unclear
The levels
amongst themselves.
established is, it imagines or assumes that you're in that environment with that level of PCBs in the air for 8 hours a day,
Without
you know,
moving,
for a
changing
whole
classrooms.
180 days.
I understand we're erring on the side of caution, but the levels are different for adults versus children, so if the
Yes.
building were to be used as not for children, you would have a somewhat different
Higher
analysis,
levels,
Yes.
yeah.
is what I'm trying to say.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've told us that from the beginning.
So
Which isn't
a
our
calculation of that
responsibility.
would be,
That's the building, the town building department. If we're looking at using it for other town departments, well, then that would be,
it's just one more permutation of the calculations that get made. If you have to bring it down to this level, it's this. If you have to bring it down a level lower, it's gonna cost you this more additional.
we've got a lot of that in the original quote, so I do look forward to seeing that as well, so.
All right, let's go.
All right, yeah, I mean, anything we, we can't point, and we can't steer this ship in a direction until we have that question answered. I mean, if repairing that school, bringing that school to where it needs to be is completely unreasonable, and it's never gonna happen, then we need to get away from it, turn
Well,
that ship.
We
But
need to make a decision
we
at
need-
that point.
we need that
I don't
information
want to make any illusions that
sooner than later.
Well, but I mean, in conjunction with that, we had the other conversation that we had at our working meeting, which is,
Oh.
if we're gonna abandon that building, what does that cost versus what does it cost to do things at other buildings, which could potentially lead you into other cans of worms? I don't think we can do, I think that's the first step, But I don't think we can do that analysis and make a final determination
No.
until we know if we abandon this building, what are the ramifications for the other buildings?
And I don't think at this point we're there yet.
I understand that,
I'm
but-
just looking
That's why
for
it was a separate.
one piece.
Right, so
So
is
that
that
you
a,
guys can start the discussion, and I know that the town wants to take it, make it a bigger question. That's where we talked about perhaps having the capital improvement planning committee talk about it as a town.
all right, so do
A
you need,
motion?
do you need, we need a motion?
Yeah,
or just-
motion to allow, to request that the superintendent get quotes, to get numbers with regard to the middle school PCB remediation
Second,
project.
Second.
discussion?
Yeah, it was my suggestion, we look at the existing proposals, that is our purview, I mean, we have copies of it, and start to calculate on our own. I think that's the first step. I'm not in favor of bringing in new consultants to visit the PCB issue when a current consultant who's actually working on our roofs has had experience with our PCBs. We have presentations from them indicating what the cost would be to make the additional needed improvements in that building, and I think we need to get to that starting point. I'm not comfortable with starting a process to put a study together until we can make conclusions on that last study.
My motion
summer.
is asking to authorize for him to get bids. That doesn't mean we're spending the money. It's putting the options in. If Pink comes in and says, hey, I've done all the work and this is the final result and you don't really need to spend another dollar, that would be great. I'm not so sure that's true. That's not the way consultants usually work.
Any other comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Opposed?
Opposed.
Have to wait for another day.
So I'd like to make a motion to, regarding the Westport Middle School, to ask Dr. Colley to gather the information as presented from Pink and Company as they prepared cost estimates for Westport Middle School PCB remediation. And with that analysis, we'll be able to come up with some of those costs that have not been incurred yet. I mean, the original presentation had a lot of variable costs, of which we chose some. And I think if we pull that out and look at it, we'll be able to, that's our starting point. In order for me to know the next step, I need to know what we're looking at, what we already have estimates on.
Have a second?
Second.
Discussion?
My concern with that is that we're not dealing with the full facts. I mean, it may be a starting point, but we're, again, just losing time with regards to trying to get this moving forward. Going out to bid, asking people to give us an analysis of what it would cost, including the company that Mr. Sullivan's talking about, doesn't cost us anything, and we don't lose anything by doing that.
Mike.
All we do is delay making a decision by first starting with what we supposedly have that may not be full. My understanding is when they got into the building and they started doing more work, they found different variables. They kept finding more here and finding more there. And their first analysis was not what the end analysis became.
Tony?
Let me just, Mike, what I'm getting from you is that we're gonna look at this information, which we have, it's out there in piles somewhere. And we as a committee are gonna decide by looking at that information on our own, that to move forward, or
No, I'm repeating a
when
request.
things change
I'm
in the year?
repeating a request I put forward at the last meeting where this was on the agenda. I met the consultants. I made it very clear that I know we have some proposals in place. We know, we can calculate, I don't know that it's in a pile someplace. I requested at the last meeting that it be forwarded to us. I don't take responsibility for the delays. I'm asking that we pull out the Pink information If it's in piles somewhere, or if it's in a file somewhere, is where I hope it is, and start to refer to the presentation for tasks that we know have to be done if we're gonna be in that building 3 years from now. And it was very clearly in those presentations, and that gives us a starting point. It's irresponsible to ask for bids when we don't know what when we don't do our research. And that information is only 2 years old, a year old, and it's a good base information, and I've asked that we look at that before we
Eric?
go further with
Through the
consultants.
chair, I would hope that we spent $3.2 million on all the facts. I would hope that we didn't spend taxpayer money on insufficient information. They gave us all this information before. They told us exactly, and we cherry-picked what we wanted to do in the building. And they have come up with cost analysis of removing all the brick around every single window because it seeped into there, into the beams. We have all of that information already. Pink needs to come back here and say, now that we've got you back in the building, here's what the end result is gonna be. He has the information already.
Well, and we have, I think we need to have that before the 20th, so that we can go forward and say, well, here are some of the tasks that still have to be done.
I'm not sure if all the tasks had money attached to them, though. I
Well,
mean, that was,
Yeah,
it's just my recollection.
I-
I
What
have
the
it in
tasks
front.
we
are.
have to look at it.
Mike, yes, Eric, you're absolutely correct. We've paid for this information. It's here, we have it. Yes, we should look at it. I mean, my only, as a bunch of laymen here, just looking at that information, are we gonna be able to determine a course of action on our own? Seems like that's where Mike's going, but I think at some point, we gotta do, I mean, I have no problem looking at the information first.
That's all
It's
I'm
just
saying.
guidance to,
We
when
may,
we do go to
we
bid,
will
to
end
say
up with
guidance, here's what we need to look
consultants.
at.
Or here's our starting point.
Here's our starting point. It just
All right,
gives it.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
No.
Okay, let's move on. No, what I was gonna say before about the middle school was that the watershed project for the parking lot in the back.
Oh, it's parking lots all around the school.
Well, I know, but the actual, the north side parking lot adjoining the
Right,
tennis
they were gonna
courts.
do the
That
whole
little
in the
strip,
middle.
I mean, it seems like none of us want that to happen, and we don't wanna drive through there one day and see
We haven't approved it, so
we
I
need,
don't see how it
yeah,
can
we
happen.
haven't approved anything, so, I mean, I saw stakes there yesterday, I mean, we need to.
No, the Board of Selectmen did also meet separately, and it seemed to be that
They
the
approved.
contractor didn't mention to the Board of Selectmen that the school committee had been anything but advised of this project. So I think we have to make contact
We
with
need
someone.
to,
What would you like me to do? Tell the
I'm-
contract to cease and desist?
I know, it's not on the agenda, but we need to.
Well, but what is on the agenda is the tennis courts, so that's
Yeah,
related to that.
What would you want
it's a
me to
stretch.
do?
It's a stretch.
All right, but someone needs to make a call.
To tell them?
See if they're
what?
putting that strip down the middle of
Say,
the parking lot.
we don't want that
It is
strip in
staying
the middle
down.
of the parking
I will
lot.
call Jack. Seems that he's in tune to the schedule. Jack Healy and/or Jack.
I mean, there's a lot of
Sisson.
issues why we shouldn't do that. Plowing was one. Okay.
Accidents.
All right, let's move on to routine matters, approval of the minutes for Wednesday, July 6th, 2012.
Sure, I abstain from both. What's the day Friday?
I had on the first page, on the bottom, B, discussion